didn't want this running out. Good morning and welcome to today's Hatsubon service. Can you hear me? Sorry. Good morning and welcome to today's Hatsubon service. It's a special service for me just because it's one of our first in-person services since we closed down in March of 2020. So I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for coming out and helping with our festival yesterday. Right now we will start with Sutra chanting and the reading of the Hatsubon names by Reverend Hirano. No Sutra chanting. Sorry, there is no Sutra chanting for the public, as it said by Reverend Hirano only.
So just start reading the names and during the Sutra chanting.
All right, I will read the names while Sensei is chanting, and then as I read your names, you can come up, please. Grab some sanitizer, do your hands, and then gasho. That's how we're allowing you to gasho.
작고 벽지기 벽고 미묘고 이호수 거구라 거구도 조주녀 그 덕구 쇼고는 샤이 호수이 그 거구도 조사 댕가로곤 이지 주야 구지니 만다 가게고 거구시 조조이 쇼당 가구니 거구조시 묘케 그요 타오지만 너그 소구이 지기지 갱소홍 건지교교 샤이 호수거구라 거구도 조주교세 그거구 쇼곤 의샤샤이 호수이 거구조 스즈키며 사시기 시초벽고 그저구 오근샤이 가로ದಿಂ가 그명시 초세 쇼시 초초야 구지
Kneel down. Sorry that I forgot to announce Bruce Sagasta. Thanks, Jane, for reminding me. All right, we will now have a special Hatsubon Dharma talk by Reverend Hirano.
Thus have I heard, once the Buddha dwelt in the Atapinda garden of Jetavana in the country of Shravasti, together with a large company of bhikshus, 1,250 members. They were all great arhats, well known among people. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Good afternoon, everyone. It feels really strange to be here again. It's been over a year, right? And I was thinking today when I was going through the cemeteries. Well, today I just did the Salt Lake Cemetery, but there was only one person at the 5 places I go. When I started here in Salt Lake, over 25 years ago, there used to not be a lot. There were still people in all the areas of the cemetery. Right? On Friday, when I went to Mountain View, there were 6 people in the 2 areas. So I was thinking things are really changing within our culture and tradition. And then I was thinking of what the words of the Amida Kyo said, which I chant at all Obon services. Because the Amida Kyo is the sutra that talks about the Pure Land. And that first passage I began with is the opening passage of Amida Kyo. And it's talking about Jetavana, where the Shakyamuni Buddha had gathered. This is 1,250 of his disciples. And from that 1,250, right, it's grown to millions, all these different countries. But every country it comes to, it changes. So without a doubt, it's going to change here in the United States. Even like wearing these robes, I know we still wear it, but I think about it, my age group, when I trained and was ordained, that was close to 40 years ago, we still have to do all of that in Japan. So it's natural, right? It's still in Japan, it's traditional temples. So wearing this part of my robe, this isn't actually anything to do with Buddhism. This part, only thing that's Buddhist is this part. Or else when I wear the smaller robe, the little thing here, that's the only Buddhist portion. All the rest, although we call like the shorter one a fuho, they're just Japanese robes because Japanese wore that all the time in Japan. But in the United States, people don't wear these kind of robes. And so I'm sure that will change. Even now, things have changed. It's kind of funny, it was when Buddhism came to the United States, at least Jodo Shinshu, the first Kaikyoshi, they had robes that were made different than the robes that they wore in Japan. Because they said in the United States, people wear suits and ties. So they actually shortened the sleeves. Right? This is long, this is the Japanese style. But the ones that they made for the first Kaikyoshi, the robes were about this short. Because they had suits underneath. Right? And even when I first started, I had come from Japan, and I trained in Japan, so I was wearing these things quite a bit because at my school you did that every day. Right? So the 3 years I was there, every day you wear this type of dress. But when I came here, there were still Issei Kaikyoshi. There were people who didn't speak too much English. They go, "Are you wearing that? Isn't that uncomfortable?" And I said, I don't know, I'm kind of used to wearing that because that's what I was used to. And then the groups after me, some of them thought, oh, I like wearing that too. It seems more traditional. But now we're changing again. People don't have to go to Japan anymore to read calculation. And the ones who do, they kind of go just for the experience. So they might go for 6 months. And they'll say that they were trained in Japan. Whereas my group, it was 3 to 5 years, right? You had to learn to read and write Japanese. And before that, I heard it was even more strenuous. But now things are changing again. However, I was thinking about things such as Obon. I don't know how long the Obon, the dancing, will go on. Because actually it seems more popular now than way before. But I don't know how long it will be considered religious or traditional. It's just like last week, I have this podcast. We haven't put it on, but some of you know this friend of mine. His name is Dan Bomas. He used to be the NPR Morning Edition DJ. Now I think he works for KSL. But anyway, he does a podcast with me, and we did one on Buddhism and yoga. So a yoga teacher. And how many of you think of yoga as religion? I see, I don't think yoga now in the United States even think of yoga as a religious or a spiritual practice. It's kind of like aerobics, right? But yoga came into the United States at the same time exactly as Buddhism did. Yoga was introduced into the United States at the 1893 World Parliament of Religions in Chicago. It's the first time Eastern religions came to the United States. So within Buddhism, we had Theravada Buddhas, Shakusoin, who was a very famous Zen master, came with his student, who became quite well known, D.T. Suzuki. And they helped present at this 1893 conference in Chicago. And there was a guy by the name of Vivekananda who represented the Hindu religion in the United States. And yoga is one of the 6 schools within Hinduism. Right? How many of you think of that now when you think of yoga? Do you realize that it's a part of the Hindu religion? And the teacher who I was talking to, I was surprised because I hadn't heard of it. She says she thinks of yoga as her religion. And she says that she feels a very deep spiritual connection to yoga. Right? And I says that's good because most people don't think of yoga as religious at all. But I thought, how much longer until aspects of our Buddhist traditions become like that? Like Bomodori. Right? Someone told me, and this was still a while ago, but maybe 20 years ago, someone said, Obon dancing isn't Buddhist. Like, what are you talking about? They says, it's a folk thing. I says, no, it's not. You're mistaking minyo dancing, folk dancing, with Bomodori. Bomodori has always been a part of the temple. But now if I go to things like J-Cell things, I've been to things in some type of dinner or something in Hawaii, they weren't just Buddhists. They'll go, let's all get up and do Tankabushi. There's no connection to the temple. So these things are portions of our culture and our religion, those outward manifestations that are linked to culture. So this one that I wrote about the culture of Obon temples. However, for Obon itself, the service, it might change in some ways, but this sutra from almost 3,000 years ago, 2,600 years ago is when the Buddha was living, and we talk about his disciples and things, and what he talked about in this sutra was the Pure Land. And if you read through this English translation of this Mila Sutra that I was chanting, it talks about how the Buddha is telling one of his disciples of the Western land of utmost bliss. And he says, in this land is where Amida Buddha lives. And enlightenment is the essence of this land. And he talks about the ponds in the Pure Land, the lights in the Pure Land, the different birds and sounds of the Pure Land. So whenever I read it, I think of it's very aspirational. It's very much about hope. And when you lose someone you love, and that's what Obon is about, the first service, when you come to with everybody to remember all the people who have come before us. You want to have this great hope. You want to hope that they are well. The people that you love are still well. And within our tradition, our religious tradition, we talk about the land of utmost bliss, Pure Land. Right? And I think that aspirational feeling, the feeling of hope for the future, this moment, won't go away. We need these feelings as human beings, right, to continue on. And the temples itself, to some extent, over this pandemic, I kind of like it. As far as on Sunday mornings, I don't have to come rush into the temple, set up things. I'm at my house. All I do is I have an area of the house where I have my lights on and everything. Carmela has her little camera there with Zoom lighting. And I just do it there. And it's like just talking to Carmela. I run these seminars for CVE that I'm the director for called, we call it SOFA. SOFA online, what do they represent? The staff at my CVE always likes to pick up these little names, acronyms. SOFA. Seminars online for all. That's what the SOFA said. But that too, I'm at home looking on the screen, and I don't think about it, but you know, we have maybe 150, 200 people tuning into the Zoom. But the thing that's strange is they're in the US, so we have to have it at a certain time. We hold it at 12 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, because in California, that's 11. But in Hawaii, that's 8 o'clock in the morning. And then New York, that's like 3 in the afternoon, but we have people tuning in Europe, right? So it's 7 and 8 o'clock in the evening. And so we have to have this much wider idea. But being at home is nice. And so every couple of weeks, in theory, I said, I've seen all these people all over the world. But it's not the same. Temples cannot survive without meeting in person. It can't be just Zoom. It doesn't work that way. There's something about the interaction close up with other human beings, learning to get along with one another. And so that's why I'm so happy that we're getting back together. Why? We didn't do the threefold refuge, but usually on services we do the three treasures. And three treasures aren't just an arbitrary thing that somebody thought about culturally. Right? It's the Buddha, the Sangha, and the Dharma. So Buddha is, we're talking about Amida Buddha first, is Jodo Shinshu, who resides in Pure Land and whose enlightenment expands throughout the universe. The Dharma is the second part, which is the teachings. Not the traditions, the teachings. But the third, which is just as important, is that Sangha. We don't say, well, you could take refuge in 2 out of 3. It's in taking refuge in all 3. Because to really understand what Buddhism is about, you need that. And I believe this within the Dharma and things such as Obon, when I says we need that aspiration. It's something that you can't just fit into science. To me, it's something that transcends science. I saw this joke this morning when I was talking about, because I just did some things for this podcast. And I said, you know, the #1 Buddhist podcast, at least on my podcast app, it's called Secular Buddhist. And it's by, I think he's an ex-Mormon missionary who has no training in, at least academic training in Buddhism. He's read a lot of books on Thich Nhat Hanh and Dalai Lama. But it's the biggest podcast under that category, Buddhism. So that's what made me think about this. I wonder how long Buddhism, as we know it, will continue. Yoga has gotten rid of everything. But anyway, the secular Buddhist says that if it's not in science, it's not in Buddhism. And I know there's a lot of people in Jodo Shinshu who think that also. Right? So they talk about Amida Buddha as it's just a myth. It's just the finger pointing at the moon. There's no truth to it. And for me, I think that if you start to talk in that way, you're moving towards how yoga went. So if you appreciate the temple, you have to understand that it's about all 3. Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And they all are interconnected. And some of these things can really help. And death isn't going to start. No matter how much you read and listen to podcasts, and read like I have been during this pandemic, the life expectancy is expected to increase and increase, and death isn't going to go away. And the fact that people you love die will not change. So we need these traditions, I do, to keep me going on. And I hope that all of you support one another for this goal and objective. So this pandemic has shut it. It's been very good. There's been a lot of sadness. You know, today's service, I think about not only our temple members who died, but all the people who have died. There's been great sadness that has come about because of it. But it's made all of us think that it's not just day after day the same. Things can change. Everything we take for granted can be taken away. But we can transcend it when we come together. So I think that's what Obon and Hatsubon. Because as I've always said, when you look at all these names, everybody there, their biggest wish, even though they're physically not here, is that you have a great life. That you live your life to its fullest potential. I've told my girls this. You know, I said, I hope you cry a little bit when I'm dead. It'd be kind of disappointing if you did feel a little sad when I'm dead. But I don't want it to devastate you. I want you to have the best life as possible. So this is what Obon should remind each of us. So I'm glad we're starting to come back little by little. Even my voice, I can feel how just chanting even myself at all the 5 areas in the Salt Lake Center, I'm not used to doing it anymore. I'm not used to talking this long, but we'll get back to it. Right? This is just the beginning of the war. I was telling Carmela, this weekend from here, next week is Ogden, Honeydale. Week after that is Oregon, Mary's in Oregon. So I don't have to do all the 16 cemeteries that I did last year in between Ontario, Oregon, and Boise. But I still have to do Nevada, Wyoming, Minidoka, in Idaho. So still about 1,000 miles. But it's a good way for me to kind of get back into it. So I look forward to seeing all of you again in September when we can start our regular Sunday services. So we'll close today with Dasha. Thus have I heard, once the Buddha dwelt in the Anatapinda garden of Jetavana, in the country of Sravasa, together with a large company of bhikshus, with 1,250 members. They were all great arhats and well known among the people. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.